Hello and welcome to GameSec. Once again, it's time to take a look at some modern accessories for your retro consoles. And I love this because you know what that means? It means that retro gaming is still alive and kicking, and it's better than ever before. And the first thing I'm going to look at, when I first saw it, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work very well, but fortunately I was wrong. Let's check it out. First up is the Retropad 32 from Bruno Freitas. When I first got it and looked at it, I was like, holy crap, what the hell is this mess? Well, it's basically a controller adapter that's actually really cool. It's compatible with most retro systems and even USB. Want to use an NES controller on your Sega Master System? Well, you can do that. A Sega Saturn controller on your Sega Genesis? Well, why not? A Gamecube controller on your Nintendo 64? Of course! Or maybe a Sega Master System controller on your Xbox? I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you can. You can even use a Super Nintendo controller on your Super Nintendo. What kind of crazy world is this? In fact, it can do all this and more. Inside the Retropad 32 is a 32-bit 72MHz ARM Cortex M3 microcontroller. On one side of the adapter, you plug in the cable for the controller that you want to use, a Dreamcast cable adapter for example. Then you plug your controller into that. There are many different controllers that you can use, and each input and output are automatically detected. You can even plug a Neo Geo controller straight in without an adapter. On the other side of the Retropad 32 is a USB jack and also an RJ45 jack. If you're playing on a console, you'll plug the adapter of the system that you want to go to into the RJ45 jack. So a PlayStation cable, for example. Then just plug that into a PlayStation or PlayStation 2. Power it up and then suddenly you're playing a PlayStation game with your Dreamcast controller. Some consoles, like the Nintendo 64, won't recognize the Retropad 32 right away because it hasn't booted up fast enough. Simply pressing the reset button on the console will fix this. This device draws the power that it needs from the console's controller port, so you don't need to plug it in anywhere else, with one exception which I'll get to in a bit. There's also the multi-out box, which extends the range of consoles you can output to, adding outputs for the NES, the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, the Saturn, and Neo Geo with appropriate adapters. Now, I don't know why these particular consoles need this box attached, but that's just the way it is for now. I have version 1.4 of this box, but version 2 onwards will also let you connect to a 3DO and also let you use 3 or 6 button arrangements when connecting to a Genesis. Unfortunately, with the version of the box that I have, all 6 button games on the Genesis think that I'm using a 3 button controller. Likewise, there's a separate board for attaching TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine controllers to the input side. There's a ton of different controllers that you can plug into this thing and use. I mean, just look at all of these. And likewise, the Retropad 32 connects to a ton of different consoles for you to use these controllers on. You can even connect Wii controllers like the Nunchuck and map the accelerometer to the left and right of a D-pad, for example. More on button mapping in just a sec. It retails for $57 or $67 if you want the aluminum case, or aluminium if you prefer. The optional multi-out box will add another $45. So it's not cheap and it's not for everyone, but it's very impressive in what it does. The USB jack on the Retropad 32, of course, goes to your PC. That way you can use all your favorite controllers to play your favorite emulators. I tried using my real Gamecube controller to play Super Monkey Ball on a Gamecube emulator called Dolphin. The emulator recognized the Retropad 32 as a USB device, allowed me to select it, and I set up my controls. Afterwards, everything worked perfectly, and I couldn't detect any lag beyond what inherently exists in the emulation itself. It makes using Dolphin much more comfortable compared to using, say, a PlayStation 3 controller with its slightly less nice analog stick. And plus, it's a real Gamecube controller. And yes, you can even use your real Gamecube controller on the Wii U and the Switch for Smash Brothers. The USB output is also used to connect to the original Xbox console. While the Retropad 32 is connected to your PC, you can connect a dongle which will let you update the firmware and use the Mapper app that you can download. This app runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac. And using the Mapper app, you can tell the Retropad 32 how you'd like the buttons to be mapped. Of course, this is often essential. For example, the default mapping for using a Genesis controller on the NES uses the Genesis A button for the NES B button and B for A. But if you'd rather use button C on your Genesis controller to jump in NES games, well, you can change the mapping and it stays that way until you change it again. But be aware that this affects all other outputs with that controller as well. It just changes the mapping for the input controller. It would be nice to change an input to an output controller on an individual basis. However, you can save and load profiles, which makes the whole process easier and faster. All of the combinations that I tried work great for the most part. There's no lag that I can perceive, but some has to be there. But I was able to get past this part of Gutsman stage in the original Mega Man my first time playing with the Genesis controller on the NES, so if there is any lag, it's absolutely imperceptible to me. When I do the manual lag test using the 240p test suite, I average about 0.8 frames of lag using an NES controller plugged right into the control deck. Using a Genesis pad plugged into the Retropad 32 plugged into the NES, I average 0.9 frames of lag, which could just be human error. When I take the Sega Light Phaser and adapt it back to the Master System connector, I can pull the trigger and the screen flashes, but it never registers a target being hit when I play on a CRT. I don't know if this is a lag issue or if it just doesn't work with the Light Phaser. Likewise, converting the zapper back to the NES isn't recognized and the screen doesn't even flash. There's no reason ever to do this, of course, it's just a really good test for lag. Oh, but how I would love to be able to use the Light Phaser in Zapper games since it's a much better gun, but they work differently, so unfortunately there's no way they could ever be cross-compatible. Lastly, there's a USB input module so you can use USB controllers on your favorite retro consoles. There's a switch on this that provides power to the controllers if they need it, and for this you'll need to plug in the USB power to the side of the box. This is the only time you'll ever need to provide external power to the Retropad 32. Overall, this is a great device that's incredibly versatile and effective. Yeah, it can be kind of messy, but it absolutely works as advertised. Okay, so the Retropad 32 is pretty crazy, but hey, it works, and it works pretty well. Now I've got two things coming up, one for Game Boy fans and another for Dreamcast fans. Next up is the GB01 cart reader from Submodule. This retails for about $50 and basically you plug Game Boy games into it. That's it, the end. Wait, actually this does a bit more. With this, you can copy your Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games that you personally own to your Mac or PC with the Submodule cartridge reader software. That way, you can legally play your own games on emulators and flash carts and what have you. The software is very well made. I like how it recognizes which game you have plugged in and it gives you a little bit of info about it. When you dump your ROM, it even gives you a little JPEG file just for funsies. It'll even transfer your Game Boy camera pictures if you have one. I don't, so I had to borrow one from Dave, and he seems to have some interesting pictures on this. That's all pretty cool, but there's one other thing that this device does which I feel is much more important. It transfers your game saves back and forth if the game has a save function. Do you have a save file in Link's Awakening, for example, that you're attached to? Or probably Pokemon in most people's case. But you're worried that the battery in the cartridge may die soon? Well, now you can copy that save file to your PC for safekeeping. Then you switch out the battery in the game or have someone who knows what they're doing do it for you. When that's all taken care of, just transfer the old game save back onto the cartridge and then you're good to go for at least a dozen more years. You can also use your game save files in emulators and flash carts. Likewise, save files generated by emulators and flash carts can be transferred over to a real cartridge. It can transfer as a .sav or the native file extension in the case of Game Boy Advance games. Some emulators need the proper file extension to load them, but other emulators will only load them if they are .sav. If you're using an emulator or a flash cart, you'll also have to rename the save file to match the exact name of your ROM file if it's different. The GB01 doesn't care what the extension is when you transfer it back to the cartridge, however, and it works fine regardless. All save files that I have personally dumped have worked fine going either way. So for game save preservation alone, this is a really cool little device. And if you want to know more about game save preservation methods, My Life in Gaming has a couple of good episodes about it and I recommend you check them out. One thing that I like that you can get, but you need to have it installed, is the DC HDMI from Citrus 3000 PSI and Kriz 2600. It's installed into your Sega Dreamcast and provides HDMI video while maintaining the normal analog output functionality. In order to determine if your Dreamcast is compatible, it must have a 0 or a 1 right here. You can access the DC HDMI menu by pressing and holding the X and A buttons, then pressing the L and R triggers, and then pressing Start. After that, you can let go of all the buttons. From here, you can choose how you want it to output. You can select native VGA, 480p, which is basically the same thing but really only for some homebrew games, 960p or 1080p. 1080p is actually just 960p but with a black window around everything. All HD TVs should like this, and this is the mode that I use. There are also other things that you can do like enable scan lines and adjust how they look. And I've got to say that I really love the quality of the video output when it's set to 1080p. It's scaled pixel perfectly and it looks exceedingly sharp on VGA supported games. I've always had a hard time capturing Dreamcast footage because I've had to find a way to convert the VGA into something that can be captured. The Toro VGA box helped with this a lot since it also had a SCART output, but the FrameMeister doesn't handle 480p sources very well, so the result was a slightly blurry experience. By comparison, the DC HDMI is as crisp and as clean as you're gonna get, and it's all just a single wire. The DC HDMI has built-in Wi-Fi connectivity for firmware updates. And no, this will not also act as a broadband adapter for your games. Once you have it connected to your router, it's easy to check for and download new firmware updates. After that, you flash the update and then restart your system. The newer firmware allows you to choose how to handle games that don't have a VGA mode, like Konami's Air Force Delta here. I choose Bob Deinterlace, which is jittery, but it looks somewhat like real interlacing, all things considered, I guess. But in order for this to work properly, you'll need to change the video mode to cable detect. Unfortunately, this is the only way that this game and a few others can be played with the DC HDMI. Thanks, Konami, for not taking the extra 45 seconds it would have required to program a proper VGA mode into the game. Oh well, life goes on. If you try to play 240p games like Bangayo, it puts a tiny screen in the corner and it's still all glitched out. Running it in the cable detect mode allows me to play it full screen, kind of. As you can see, I can't capture it very well though. You might actually be better off playing this one in Compositor S video. Other 240p games like Street Fighter 3 are designed with a VGA mode in mind, so they work perfectly fine. If you know what resolution the game you're about to play runs in, the DC HDMI offers a few different buttons you can hold down while booting up your game so that you don't have to constantly change things back and forth in the menu. You definitely don't want to run your game in cable detect mode if you can help it because it can make proper VGA games look pretty bad in comparison. Only use it if you absolutely have to. Anyway, back to the firmware. There's a standard and a relaxed version that you can choose. The standard one is for people whose TV or monitors give them issues, but the version with the relaxed timing offers an interesting HQ2X filter. This is a common filter in emulators and it can make bitmapped graphics look kind of mushy. However, it does smooth out the polygon edges to make them less aliased and more clean. So I'd suggest trying out the relaxed mode, and if that's not working well for you, well, go back to the standard mode. If you change this setting, you'll need to re-download and reinstall the firmware. Overall, I feel that this is an insanely awesome upgrade for my Dreamcast. It keeps the connection simple, and for the large majority of the games, it works perfectly. At $150, it's not for everyone, but it certainly is for me, especially when I capture video. It's awesome to finally get some amazing video quality out of the Sega Dreamcast, but I wonder if there are any solutions for the Nintendo Gamecube. Do you wish you had a set of component cables for the Nintendo Gamecube? Well, not only are they crazy expensive these days, but they don't even provide audio because Nintendo is dumb. You have to use a Super Nintendo or an N64 cable connected to the analog jack to get audio. But witness the EON GCHD HDMI and component video adapter. This $150 device plugs into the back of your Gamecube as long as it has a digital out port. And when you plug it in, make sure you push it hard until it clicks. Connect an HDMI cable and you'll get 480p video as well as audio. This is also the Mark II version, which features an analog jack for you to use Wii component cables and even a headphone jack with digital audio. Problem solved! Well, as long as you use it correctly. By holding down the button on the back of the GCHD, you can program any infrared remote in the world to work with it and adjust the menu settings, like line doubling 480i video. That's right, unless you tell it otherwise, this always outputs in 480p. You can turn on scan lines if you want and adjust them to your liking. You can even set up how each individual resolution is automatically handled by the unit. So if you don't want 240p to be doubled, for example, you can turn that off. The output quality is very crisp, and so is the audio. However, it's important to note that this does not upscale the video at all. It all remains at 480p. So, despite what the marketing might suggest, this is not HD video and you are not playing your GameCube in HD. It's extended definition at best. To enable progressive scan in most games, be sure to hold down the B button as you boot the game. Otherwise, the game plays in interlaced mode, line double to 480p, and you don't want to do that unless the game forces you to. There's really no lag here because the video signal originates digitally and it remains that way all the way to your TV, and there's no scaling or frame buffering happening at all. If anything, it's your TV itself that's going to be adding some lag as it upscales to 480p video. The audio also sounds very good. If you want to use a component cable, then just plug in the easy-to-obtain Wii component cable into the device. It doesn't behave like Nintendo's component cable as it always outputs in 480p unless you change it. Like the HDMI connection, it's all controlled by the menu. And the video quality is again extremely good. But the audio is pretty bad. It's extremely loud and distorted compared to the HDMI mode and the analog out jack, and there's no way to adjust it. It seems to depend on the game though, as it doesn't affect Pikmin here. I've also been told that this issue has been fixed in their newer models. Of course, you can run Game Boy Advance games and whatnot if you have the Game Boy player. But if you have the Action Replay memory card bundle I talked about the last time I did one of these episodes, and a TV that can handle 240p over HDMI, you can even run the Game Boy interface. Turn off line doubling for 240p sources on this one. It looks great in both component and HDMI, and there doesn't seem to be any audio loudness issues here when using the Wii component cables. For this video, I'm capturing through a FrameMeister doing a 5x scale, so your results might be a hair better if you're just trying to play it on your TV. The EON has some competition with the Carby from Insurrection Industries. This device costs half as much at $75. It also features a plug that is indistinguishable from the original Nintendo component cable plug. As a result, it plugs right in with ease and works every time. It even comes with its own little remote that's ready to go. Just press the OK button to call up the menu, which is identical to the EON's menu with all of the same exact features and settings. The Carby lacks the ability to connect component cables, digital audio out, and analog audio though. But as far as HDMI picture and sound go, it's mostly equal to the EON as it always outputs in 480p unless you tell it not to. So don't forget to hold that B button when you boot your games. I can't stress that enough. And of course, it will also play Game Boy games and output 240p over the HDMI cable if that's what you'd like to do. Insurrection Industries also has their own standalone component cable for sale, clocking in at under $90. This is a prototype of the cable, but the final one, which is likely available by the time you see this episode, will have a proper molded strain relief. It'll also be a bit thinner. Like the original Nintendo cables, this one has a built-in digital to analog converter in addition to the board, which is similar to what's inside the Carby. This is meant as a direct replacement to the original Nintendo cables. That means you'll need to bring your own audio with these. They also behave identically to Nintendo's cables as it outputs whatever the console is actually outputting. It doesn't line double 480i to 480p. However, Insurrection Industries says that the final cables will have an infrared sensor so that you can program virtually any remote, similar to the way the EON does it. That way you can have all of those Carby video options as well. Anyway, as you can see, the video quality looks extremely good with these cables. Now you're probably wondering how all of these things compare to each other and the original Nintendo component cables when it comes to picture quality. With the exception of the Game Boy Advance game, I captured everything in the segment at 480p using a Blackmagic Design Intensity Shuttle to ProRes 422 files. So none of that H.264 garbage. Compared to the original Nintendo cables, the EON component video cable is slightly shifted to the left, but not much. The EON component cable is also slightly darker than the real Nintendo GameCube cables, but again not by much. There's a bit less bleed in the red colors than the original component cables, and as a result it looks a bit better. The Insurrection Industries Carby component cables yield pretty much the same results as the EON with the Wii component cables attached. It has the same slight pixel shift to the left, and the colors are also slightly darker than the original cable. However, they're not as dark as the EON is with the Wii cables. Again, this variance in brightness is very minute. And yes, the red color bleed is also better than Nintendo's cables. As far as using HDMI goes, the EON shifts the image even more to the left and also a bit downwards compared to the original cables. Color and detail wise, they match up to the original cables really well. In fact, the EON might be a hair brighter. And the red color bleed is even better here than the EON and Carby component cables, giving it the best image yet. The Carby HDMI has the same downward shift as the EON HDMI output, but remains more centered, with an ever so slight right shift compared to the original Nintendo cables. Like the EON HDMI, the Carby HDMI has less color bleed on the red than the original cables. The only difference between the EON and the Carby HDMI output is where they land on screen. Otherwise, there's absolutely no difference in video quality. When it comes to playing Game Boy Advance games in 240p via the Game Boy interface, the results are mostly similar. All of these devices are great, so pick whichever one works best for you and your budget and enjoy some better Gamecube video.
Draw that surface fire away from me. We'll take care of the guns.
We're running out of time.
2 more to go. Great shot, Luke. 1 more to go.
Red Leader, this is Base 1. Keep half your group out of range for the next run.
Okay, this is an interesting last-minute addition. I had already finished editing this entire episode when the Super 64 from EON was announced. Well, the episode was running a touch short anyway, so why not squeeze it in here? Similar to the GCHD and the Carby, this is an adapter meant for your Nintendo 64 which allows you to hook it up to an HDMI input on your TV. However, Nintendo doesn't really believe in RGB and only ever universally supported it on the Super Nintendo, though PAL Gamecubes did have RGB wired up. Other than that, S-Video is as good as you're gonna get with any classic Nintendo console without modding it. Because of this, the Super 64 here uses analog S-Video as its source signal and converts that to HDMI, which honestly is completely understandable. It line doubles the incoming signal and outputs 480p. There's a button on the side that you can press which activates the only feature on this unit, and that's the smoothing mode. Basically, it tries to make things less jaggy and it works with moderate success depending on the game. Personally, I prefer to keep it off. This device uses a Bob deinterlace function for games like Rogue Squadron which run in high resolution. There are no combing artifacts or anything like that when things start to move quickly, and that's good. And that's it, the end. Oh wait, this costs $149.99, just like the EON GCHD. It offers much fewer features compared to the GCHD, which is the same price. Anyway, here's F-Zero-X running with the Super 64. And here's F-Zero-X running an RGB through the FrameMeister. And here's Wave Race 64 running through the Super 64. And again, here's Wave Race 64 running an RGB. What's really interesting is that the FrameMeister can't see the video from the Super 64 at all. And that's weird, because the FrameMeister sees practically anything. The Blackmagic Intensity Shuttle I used to capture all of the Gamecube HDMI component footage doesn't like it either. And what's more is that only the right audio channel works. I get nothing from the left. It's like this on every TV that I tried with every HDMI cable that I tried. This is probably just a defective unit that they sent me, but come on, maybe they should be tested before they're sent out. Like the GCHD and the Carby, there is supposedly no additional lag created by this device. But watch this. I waited nearly 2 American minutes for Mario to jump, but it never happened. But then I suddenly realized I was holding the wrong controller and, well yeah, it doesn't cause any lag. And while it fits really nicely in the back of the Nintendo 64, it doesn't fit at all in the back of the Super Nintendo. I feel that this might be a missed opportunity. I mean, if it had fit, then you could also market it as working with Super Nintendo games. It will, however, fit into the Gamecube. And this is good, because now if your Gamecube doesn't have a digital out port, you can still hook it up to your TV with HDMI. The smoothing button doesn't make a huge difference with Gamecube games. Oh, and I still only get the right side audio channel. I opened the unit up to see if I could see why I was only getting right side audio. And look at this, the left side doesn't even seem to be connected. That is not good. Underneath, there's a long metal bar. I'm not sure if this is here to mitigate noise or just add some weight. Also, why are the chips epoxied over? What are they hiding, and why? Anyway, I did a simple soldering job to reconnect the left side audio, and it worked! Lastly, this only works on US and Japanese systems, as the PAL video signal is completely different. They do say they're going to eventually have a PAL version of this though. Overall, I am not the kind of person that a device like this is marketed to, since I have everything already set up in RGB and stuff. However, I do think it's perfect for those who just want to play their N64 on their HD TV. But come on, it really should cost less. Hopefully, people will stop scalping Nintendo component cables on eBay and other places, and we can just, use one of these solutions. Anyway, what do you guys think of the products that I covered in this episode, and what products would you like me to cover in future episodes that are based on modern accessories for retro consoles? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSat. We live in a world with tons of channels on television.
It seems they're bisexual.
Tons more on YouTube.
What do you think of my hair? Let me know down in the comments below.
But the one channel that meant anything at all is gone. All these years we've been so deprived. Perhaps it's time to tune in once again.